This is Playground Ethics, an essay written and read by Morgan Smalley, animated by Chelsea Smalley. In 3rd grade, my legs might as well have been carrot sticks, little vestigial things, more suitable for a horse's snack than for running. Being it in the game of tag was a special kind of hell, one of leg cramps and sweat and effort. As an adult, even between eye-popping rage screams on my traffic-laden commute, I feel little nostalgia for this quintessential playground ritual. In 2nd grade, I loved tag. It was a beautiful, adrenaline-filled break from the usual grind of multiplication cards and revisionist history. So, why the drastic change of heart from 2nd grade to 3rd? Well, reader, it may have been because of you. Don't try to get out of this. Quick rewind to 2nd grade. My carroty legs didn't render me the fastest runner, but I made do. If I was it, my success rate with pursuit predation was slim, but I had stamina. I knew about a little thing called persistence hunting, thank you very much. Channeling this ancestral endurance technique, I'd track one unfortunate prey over long distances until they slowly but surely tuckered out and surrendered. Fellow Girl Scout Megan Kaminsky may have bested me in the 10-meter sprint, but in the long game, she was mine. Tag, you're it. If stamina failed me, I went with the old classic misdirection. I'd communicate a certain trajectory, disappear behind some playground equipment, then jump back out the same way I came and slap an unsuspecting nail-biter on the back. Tag, you're it. Moving in 2 whole directions, top 10 greatest accomplishments for the scrawny Smalley. My final maneuver involved a balance of subtlety and deceit. I called it hiding underneath the slide until presented with a vulnerable ankle, deliciously effective against those yet to be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Tag, you're it. They had a tendency to forget they were even playing tag in the first place. Endurance, misdirection, the element of surprise. This tactical trifecta got me through recess and gym with my dignity intact. You may have gathered by now that I like to remember myself as quite precocious. Jump to 3rd grade, the dreaded year, the first day of school, recess. I was it, and thus employing my tactics. After several agonizing, calf-burning minutes of chasing down Emma Gazelle, she was finally in reach. I stretched out my hand to make that final, devastating tap when Emma grabbed onto the chains of a nearby fence. "Base," she said. "You can't tag me. I'm on base." Base? I had never heard of base before, but being youthful and primed to adapt to fresh concepts, I gave the rule the benefit of the doubt. Base is the one place where it can't get you. That made sense, I supposed. I shrugged off this failure. Lion prides have an average hunting success rate of 19%. I moved on to another student, Charlie, the nose picker. I ran a circle around the jungle gym, pivoted, and right as my hand was about to graze the shoulder of that dumbfounded booger eater, "Base," he said, grabbing onto the jungle gym's metal rail. "That's not base," I said, pointing to the chain-link fence. "Base is over there." "Nuh-uh, this is base now. Base changed." I stroked a phantom beard and thought, was there a discussion? In my confusion, I surmised there must have been a flash town hall. The school children gathered around the swing set and deliberated on the pros and cons of the current base placement. They discussed game theory and evaluated predictive models, coming to the unanimous, pragmatic decision that the base had to be changed to that railing on the jungle gym stairs, I guess. In my focus of trying to tag someone, I had missed the entire thing. I reminded myself about the lions. I reminded myself that I lived in America, in this here country o' mine. When you get fucked, by God, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you go get fucked again. I rallied for a 3rd attempt at surrendering my it status. This go-around, I bided my time under the slide, rearing up to slap Cankle. I delighted upon seeing said Cankle stroll into view, but before I could even make contact, I heard that horrid word. "Base." I would have rather had a cow's tongue in my ear than that word. There was no chalking this change up to speed democracy. I stood up to face the smirking little goblin to whom the foot belonged. "You're still it. I'm on base," he said, keeping his hand glued to the slide. I flashed a contemptuous smile, the same smile a seafood restaurant waitress might give to a customer who asks for spaghetti. No, actually. Base is over there.
No, I called base,
he said. Ah, yes. He called it, just like you call shotgun, or dibs, or safety, or fives, or punch buggy, or first. Just that day the first cookie of snack time had gone to the loudest caller of first. Even with my underdeveloped brain, it troubled me that this type of behavior was gratified, encouraged by my trusted authority figures. While I sat there, still and quiet, making a point to demonstrate my patience like the virtuous little scholar I was, other kids were rewarded for how hard they could stomp on each other's toes. First! It dawned on me that perhaps the third grade would not be the meritocracy second grade me had always dreamed it would be. I took a deep breath, readied my diaphragm for a long-winded speech on the dangers of conflating new and better. I wanted to spout a textbook's worth of Kantian ethics with Aristotelian flourishings, ethos, pathos, kratos, the works. This simple game was a microcosm of a corrupt societal reward system, one that infringed upon the happiness of benevolent intellectuals such as I. Instead, what came out of my mouth was, "Hey, that's not really fair." Oh God, the heads that turned. I'd harshed the playground vibe. Nevertheless, I persisted. "You can't just say base anytime you want." I had hoped that some of the observers would side with me and speak up on my behalf. This was ridiculous. Surely someone would agree with me.
Actually, he's right, and you're wrong. Base can be anywhere now,
said a redhead with a very punchable face. Yeah, you're still at Morgan, said Gina with the pigtails and an even more punchable face. More voices chimed in, and they did not agree with me. I was the defendant of an impromptu trial. I was given no attorney. I was not read my rights. I had not one moment on the stand. This was the opposite of speed democracy. This was speed ochlocracy. Yes, while writing this, I did Google ochlocracy. No, I will not define it for you because I enjoy feeling superior. Fingers were pointed. In their view, this incident was a symptom of my overarching character flaws. "You always do this, Morgan."
"You're lying. You're a liar."
"You're still it."
"Your voice is annoying." "You're pretentious."
The jury ruled in. I was still it, and I was a stupid head, idiot, liar, pretentious girl for ever thinking otherwise. I had no choice but to swallow my pride and withstand this chorus of condemnation. You know that horrible sensation when you can feel yourself blushing? I could stuff my trembling hands into my pockets, maintain a stoic facial expression. I could keep my arms to my sides to smother the smell of a cold, nervous sweat, but I could not stifle that telling bloom of scarlet. I looked at my toes, kicked a little mulch around. My prepubescent mind was rattled. My internal monologue was starting to sound a bit like Lewis Black. What the fucking fuck is this goddamn motherfucking bullshit? Where was the integrity of my peers? Where was the justice? I kept my grievances mum. I was outnumbered. An attempt to stand up for myself would only lead to further public humiliation. I concluded that this must have been how Moses felt in the wilderness. "Okay, I'm still it," I mumbled reluctantly. The world was changing too fast for my liking. I longed for the old days. Nowadays, I think of this moment when I hear elderly conservatives complain about TikTok and rap music. Despite my feelings, the game had to go on. No longer able to employ my tactics, I bumbled from student to student, every tag rendered futile by that dreadful word, base. Red, sweaty, and huffing like an asthmatic walrus, there was no restful interlude from my aerobic torment. Worse, there was no dignity. 30 classmates watched on, cringing in vicarious humiliation, not one willing to sacrifice themselves for my sake, lest they face similar treatment. They acted as though I had the plague. They kept their distance, terrified I'd infect them with it. Tag was no longer a game, but a return to colonial-era-style public punishment. I might as well have been locked into a pillory before the Jamestown courthouse. I might as well have been tarred and feathered. Dear reader of this essay, you were most likely a child once. I don't know how they did things at your school, but it's possible you were introduced to the slippery concept of base into your games of tag. You may remember as that atrocious word became more and more common as a mechanism of thwarting personal accountability. Or maybe you recall as your games of Foursquare became overburdened with calls of cherry bomb. The caller would slam the ball into the ground as hard as they could, bouncing it impossibly high into the air. You failed to catch such a ball. You were out of the game. At the neighborhood pool, maybe you remember tagging another child in sharks and minnows, only to be foiled by them yelling,
"We're doing two-hand touch today."
In the 9-by-9-mile strip mall town known as Manassas, Virginia, we had all these things, but worst of all, we had base. Children wanted so badly to avoid the extra responsibility of being it that they would toss the word out like beads at Mardi Gras. You had a choice. Did you stand up for the integrity of the game, like Braveheart or Joan of Arc, by putting your foot down and refusing to utter those 4 rotten letters? Or did you join them in vomiting these immoral phonemes, entering the ranks of colonial loyalists or Ivanka Trump as textbook examples of complicity? Don't rewrite your personal history. You can't all have been shining exceptions like myself. It's okay to admit your guilt. I can forgive your past mistakes. After all, unless you were that first voice to say base, you too were a victim in this. Not everyone had the extraordinary intellect and willpower to transcend mob mentality that I did at the age of 8. I tossed my usual tag tactics into a mental shredder in favor of a new, shameful strategy. Hiding underneath the slide until recess is over and oh, thank Christ for the blessed 23-hour respites between such tortures. That was the end of my love of tag. That day I wrote in my diary, "Note to self, never self-advocate." Adults love to tell children, stand up for yourself, do the right thing. These adults don't understand the lawlessness of the playground. Later on that year, my universally beloved teacher, Miss Bailey, went on vacation, and for that week was replaced by the stern Miss McGalickson. The other children groaned simply at the sight of her. She just looked like the former nun type that would love to bash a child's knuckles in with a ruler. Despite her appearance, I liked our temporary teacher. She had an admirable peasanty quality about her. I imagined that in her spare time, she recited verses of the Torah to her cows while milking them. Perhaps to prove herself capable of so-called fun, she decided to turn her 5 days as our substitute into a light-hearted competition. She divided the 30 of us into groups of 5. She then devised a point system that was mostly arbitrary, but served to reward good behavior. I feel like this calls for a Harry Potter joke, but I don't want to make one. The team with the most points at the end of the day on Friday would receive a prize. My team, the Fluffernutters, was in the lead when I ruined everything. We had a quiz that Wednesday, spelling my strong suit. Before we began, Miss McGalickson discussed the wickedness of dishonesty and cheating. In her old village, known as Omaha, a little boy had lied once, so they cut off his ear and fed it to the wolves. Even worse than that, however, he had to forever live with the memory of his mistake. Shivers, goosebumps, chills. I was suddenly terrified of cheating. The substitute then gave us a proposition.
If you think you might cheat, even by accident, feel free to move your desk away from those of your classmates. We are going by honor system here. You won't be punished for moving. This seemed fair to me. I liked to think of myself as honorable, and after all, we were taking a spelling test. All it would have taken was a brief swivel of the eye to distinguish an A from an E on another student's paper. Then, boom! I'd have been a cheater, forever condemned to repent in shame. Of course, I moved my desk. It's what Christ would have done. I made it a few feet before I saw it. A shit-eating smile spreading its way across Miss McGalickson's face. I gulped. Oh, shit. I could have slapped myself. I'd walked into a trap. My Fluffernutter teammates simultaneously realized my blunder. They turned to me with urgent whispers. "You have to come back before she notices. Come back right now. You're gonna lose points for our team." I felt that familiar tinge of red, my own blood vessels betraying me. I scooted the clunky desk back into place, but it was too late.
Miss McGaelickson bristled like a British tuxedo cat. "For the teams who did not have a single member move their desk, 25 points. Oh!" She let out a cackle, or I may have imagined that. Again, I found myself furious, withstanding a torrent of insults, this time because of a teacher. Not just that, a substitute teacher that I admired. Louis Black's husky voice rattled inside me once again. "What the fucking fuck?" Droplets of the comedian's spittle flew out of my ears onto my desk. I was that angry. When all the others devalued Miss McGaelickson for her strictness, her frown lines, her stringy, damaged hair, I rooted for all of it, and this is what I got in return? Unlike the previous injustice with Tag, I hadn't been alone this time. 2 other students had moved their desks as well. They, too, faced a similar torrent of angry comments from their teammates. I turned to these 2 students, silently pleading for some comfort in our shared experience. But they never saw. They were turned away in embarrassment, laser-focused on the floor tiles. I understood. I did the same. 10 years later, I faced similar scrutiny from a fellow college student. I was at a party, drunkenly discussing homophobia with another freshman. I said, #wokely as fuckly, "I am not homophobic on purpose, but I do have some internal subconscious homophobia I have been working on." I sat back and smiled, awaiting my deserved praise. If a pepperoni had been tossed in my direction, I would have gladly snapped it up. But I did not receive praise. I received a verbal newspaper to the nose. My new peer, a self-described LGBTQIA+++ ally, chastised me for my remark. She said I should merely not have those biases in the first place. It was fucked up that I even had to work on it. Well, I guessed I had made a little whoopsie. I wasn't sure how to respond. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was the only bleeding heart socialist out there to have anything but a beaming, virtuous subconscious. While a CT scan of my brain might have revealed a hidden sludge of disgraceful, unintentional bigotry, deep dive into the flaps of anyone else's cortex and you'll find nothing but pleasant tunes and a photo of Carol Brady. I had been incriminated for the shortcomings of my unconscious thoughts. I realize now that my biggest crime, both in 3rd grade and my freshman year of college, had been wearing a little too much on my sleeve. Back to 3rd grade me. That night I jotted another note into my diary. Note to self. Don't ever admit when you may have done something wrong, or might do something wrong in the future. I guess. I figure a young Jared Kushner may have written something similar in his diary, but with more expensive ink and fewer ellipses. Years later, going to high school in a town I like to call the anus of Northern Virginia, the amount of Confederate flags in the parking lot never sat well with me. To this day, if I see a white person wearing camouflage, unless they are actively growing a deer, I can't help but assume that they are racist. This is especially true if that camo contains pink flourishes. Once again, a shortcoming of my unconscious thoughts. I'm sorry, I can't help it. My involuntary brain sludge is too strong. When I think about it now, though, despite the culture of casual or not-so-casual racism at my high school, I'm not really bothered by the behavior of the other students. They were teenagers. A teenager's ethics are at the mercy of their authority figures. I was certainly not exempt from assholery as a teenager, and I'm still not today. What I am bothered by is the behavior of some of the teachers. For example, when our high school put on a production of Little Shop of Horrors, it was our theater teacher's brilliant idea for the Greek chorus to have 9 members instead of the usual 3, with 3 subgroups: the A's, the B's, and the C's, which stood for Asian people, Black people, and Caucasian people. The thespians were instructed to play up their corresponding stereotypes. You know, humor, ha ha ha. Oh. Being white, I never faced the full brunt of my school's racism, and being an ignorant teeny bopper, I wasn't all that helpful combating it either, despite some efforts. One moment of my high school experience sticks out to me as particularly fucked up. I was in government class. The name of the NFL's Washington Redskins had come up as a conversation topic. The controversy over the team name had been in the news, so my teacher started the day with a question. Does anyone here believe the Redskins should have their names changed? I raised my hand. I was the only one. I think it's a little messed up, I said. Yeah. My teacher, Mrs. Trist, was this blonde, heel-wearing lady Republican type, brimming with internalized sexism. I should have seen this coming. I had walked into another trap. Really? She said, giggling. Well, yeah. I mean, imagine if they were called the Whiteskins, or the Honkies, or... It'd be weird. My voice trailed off, trembling and breathy as I felt the disapproving stares of my peers. Mrs. Trist's giggle switched to full-on laughter. Others in the class joined her. She looked down her nose at me and sneered, high on some kind of power trip. This was the kind of woman who got wet asking to speak to the manager at Glory Days Grill. Dead-ass, classic, snide, mean girl type shit. It was a bit on the nose, to be honest. At least Regina George was somewhat manipulative about it. At least Rizzo was charming. This was just not creative. She revved up, and the monologue that followed could have been a Broadway debut. Time slowed down. The lights dimmed. "What about Notre Dame?" she asked. "The Fighting Irish? Are we going to get rid of that name too, huh? The Cowboys? Does that offend you? How is that any different? The cowboy profession is alive and well today, I'll have you know. I don't hear them complaining they've been made into a caricature. What about the Raiders? Are we going to give some pirates their day in court? Really, it's just a name. Will changing the Redskins' name give them their land back? I don't know about you, but that's what I'm focused on. That's what really matters. What about the Boston Celtics? The Minnesota Vikings? Hello? The Buccaneers? The Texas Rangers? What about the Chicago Bears? Are we going to get angry on behalf of bears? What about... She went on and on and on. I had nowhere to go. She might as well have said base. I was outnumbered. I didn't have the words to challenge her and win. Plus, I was trying not to cry, and I don't believe incoherent blubbering counts as a pathos argument. Eventually, she ran out of steam. In 2020, having a qualm or two with the Redskins as an NFL team name is the bare minimum of considering oneself politically left. In 2015, in Manassas, Virginia, the idea was quite radical. She took my silence as a victory and smugly began whatever indoctrination she had planned for that day's lesson. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. My head danced with comebacks. I daydreamed an alternate reality in which I'd knocked her back on her ugly kitten heels with a perfect one-liner. Something about the effects of cultural semiotics on actual health and economic disparities. In my imagination, she clutched her face in horror and shame. "I've been bested!" she screeched as she melted into a steaming puddle. "Bested at last!" The classmates applauded and lifted me into the air. They threw me a party for my bravery, space-themed. There were cake pops decorated like Jupiter, my favorite planet. But this reverie was far from the truth. After receiving a minute or two of side-eye from the class, I gathered my humiliation had mostly dissipated from their memories. They went about their days as usual. My teacher's rant had been no more significant than their morning mini-wheats. I, on the other hand, have thought about this at least once a week ever since. I've reenacted the moment over and over again in the shower and on my Los Angeles commute, in between horn honks and foul language. The night after Mrs. Trist's speech, I sat in front of my diary, trying to derive a lesson from the incident. The idea that I could learn something from this was the only thing that kept me from leaving society as I knew it, stripping naked and becoming one with the wolves. Wolves might eat your tasty, tasty flesh, but at least they don't preach values akin to all lives matter. I thought about what I had done wrong that day, what behaviors of mine I could change to prevent a repeat mortification, what social skills of mine could use some beefing up. I realized, as much as I liked to think that the perfect retort could have changed her mind or given her any pause whatsoever, this was wishful thinking. Many of us can remember a time when, as children, we attempted to voice a criticism of an unfair household rule. Maybe you thought curfew was too early. Maybe you just wanted to be allowed to spend more time playing your Nintendo DS. Maybe you wanted your parents to stop boiling the carrots at dinner. Seriously, why do parents always insist on boiling the carrots? You likely spent a fair amount of time rehearsing exactly what you would say to get your parents on your side, only to be slapped in the face with their version of bass. "Go to your room." You were the child, they were the parents, you were supposed to do as they said. The high school teacher equivalent of base, I gleaned, was being a dismissive bitch. Mrs. Trist was the teacher, I was the student. I was supposed to learn from her, never the other way around. Save from keeping my mouth shut altogether, I didn't think there was any way that situation could have ended differently. The lesson I ultimately settled on writing in my diary was something like, "Note to self, Mrs. Trist is a dumb, hairy butt lady." Again, I was not exempt from teenage dessholery. Now that I'm a bona fide grown-up with 2 whole tits and a humidifier, I realize that the frustrations of my childhood are not so different from those I see now. In 2020, a scientist can dedicate their one precious life to helping others, only to be sneered at by an army of Mrs. Trists. The experts spend thousands of hours in labs witnessing with their very eyes the effectiveness of masks against COVID-19, just for a man who spends most of his free time browsing conspiracy forums to say, "I don't like the way it feels on my face." I don't at all mean to place myself in the ranks of these scientists, more so to point out that no argument is a good argument to a person who has willingly filled their earholes with sand. No matter the validity of my opinions, there will always be a Mrs. Trist around to point and laugh in my face. There will always be side-eye. There will always be a reason to blush. The days of base being the greatest injustice on my radar are long gone, but the ethics of the playground still reign supreme. There are just fewer plastic slides to hide under. Thank you so much for watching. Again, this was Playground Ethics, written and read by Morgan Smalley, animated by Chelsea Smalley.